I'm the COO at Orpheus Cyber. Despite the accent and us being a British company, I'm out here in the US in Virginia. Been in cyber around 10, 12 years, and Orpheus does risk ratings and vulnerability prioritization.
I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders here at Telivy. If you don't know already, we're a cyber risk audit assessment company that helps you essentially audit your client and prospects, and help you increase revenue, and decrease your SecOps workload. So that's what we focus on.
Well, the reason we got started is we do threat intelligence. And so we're looking at who wants to hack you and how they are going to do it. And then what we typically do is we give that to a red team who'll go check. Can they actually do the things that we think they're capable of? And we got the idea to take that methodology and turn it into a risk rating so that companies can score themselves. Insurers can score companies for underwriting. It's got really good applications for third-party risk. And a big part of that intelligence is around vulnerabilities. What's out there, what can actually be exploited, how serious they are. And so we apply that intelligence to vulnerabilities as well. And that's why we think, our scores are showing to be quite accurate, and why we can help companies really reduce their risk, but without increasing cost or resources, because we're automating all of that. So at the heart of it all is the threat intelligence, but that's us. That's what we do. Yeah, we've done a lot of work in the last 5 years with enterprise clients and some government, public sector organizations, but we've been working with MSPs for just under a year, because that thing around sort of not using as many resources is really helpful when you're focused on profitability. So we're pretty new to the MSP space, but we see that I think our solution could be really helpful there.
Yeah, so we basically, started out in the insurance industry ourselves, kind of building software for cyber insurance mostly, and then we kind of soon realized that there's a huge problem there, right? Where insurers just don't know how to assess cyber risk profitably and quantitatively, in a very effective manner. They were just a lot of times they were just kind of deploying a lot of the external scans and such, but they weren't really looking kind of what's behind the firewall, what's behind the hood. So which is why we kind of took a step back and started looking at even MSPs, how they were having the same issues too. They were saying that they were running assessment for the prospects and clients, but they would just essentially deploy one, like a network sensor or kind of like an inventory tool, and use that as essentially an assessment, to show that to the clients. So what we set out to do was have a platform where you can just deploy one agent, and it gives you essentially a holistic findings around multiple different liabilities and risks in the environment. And it basically helps you kind of map this out to NIST or CIS types of framework, and tells you what the best practices is and what you have to actually invest in to make your security posture better.
Yeah, so we focus really on MSPs or MSSPs that have some level of security in process already. So everything we're doing is probably stage 2 of your security offering. So it doesn't really matter what size or what industry, but it typically is someone that already understands security a little bit. But we've got one in particular. They actually used us to replace a solution they had, which was prioritizing vulnerabilities for them. We've been working with them for a few months now, but they were really quite impressed, I think, by how easy it was to deploy. So the initial feedback was, this was set up in minutes, and it's really easy to understand. And actually, this is saving us already a lot of time on the solution that we had before, which required us to do a lot more of our own investigation. So that's probably my favorite success story so far, because we're quite big on that. I can tell you it takes a few minutes to get these results, but actually for someone else to go validate it and be saying that on our behalf is really nice.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see a profile from multiple different type of avenues, right? One, we have that, kind of like that 2-person team where one is the owner and then they have another technician. They might have about 500 endpoints or so, and then they're looking to grow this thing. And that's where efficiencies is really important for them, kind of building kind of giving them assessment and being able to deploy it to as multiple different prospects as possible is very helpful. And that's kind of where they're looking for kind of efficiencies because they only have one or two techs to begin with, but they're also looking for a lot of growth on the sales side as well. So that's like a really good like use case for us. And another use case we've also looked into is when MSPs have anywhere between like 1,000 to 5,000 endpoints. They're a bit more on the more mature side, but now they might already have some clients, but they're looking to basically show their clients what their liabilities are, and then be able to sell them essentially, or kind of fix them and sell them more on security services there. So kind of going from just an MSP to an MSSP really, and almost finding out it's a kind of good question to start out with, right? What are the things that that we even should start deploying, and what is the risk that that we should start looking at first, so we can help them create all these 30, 60, 90-day action plans, and kind of work with their client's budget to make sure that they can deploy the things that their clients actually need, depending on their needs and regulation needs as well.
Yeah, we do, because one of the questions we'll ask when we're meeting people for the first time is, well, what vulnerability scanner are you using? And sometimes people say, I'm not, or like, what's that? And then you're like, okay, you're not ready for us, right? But when they know, then the question is, well, how much time is it taking you to go through those results? And it's typically a lot. And that's where they go, okay, I get how you add value. Or for the risk ratings and the third party application, they're the ones that are a little bit more mature. And it has been an education process on that, because MSPs work with smaller businesses that don't really care about cybersecurity, let alone what the cybersecurity is of their suppliers. But I've really seen that change in the last year, where they see that actually this is important. Naren, you're probably seeing the same thing. The insurers care about what's going on with your third parties. So we're seeing that education piece is happening, and MSPs are upskilling in cyber really fast. Like, they're really maturing quickly, I think.
That's really interesting, because that's one of the things that we've been seeing as well, is now customers are coming to MSPs and asking them for audits and letting them know what their weak spots is. And it's certainly starting to become, as you said, kind of like a requirement for insurance, or a requirement even to get other customers, because they're getting asked to fill out security questionnaires, and just make sure that they're protecting their customers' data properly. So it really is kind of tailwind in the whole industry, and I think there's going to be a higher and higher penetration rate for smaller businesses to focus on their risk properly.
Well, I think this is a good example of actually how our solutions are quite complementary, because what we have is an outside in look. So if you're going to a new client, you can't deploy things onto their network right yet. But we can give you that outside in picture. So we have a few MSPs that use our reports, not for the third party risk that they're intended, but for sales. This is where you look really bad, and actually you see it as a cost center, but how much is it going to cost you if you are taken offline for a week? Because here are 3 ways someone can do it. And then, what you guys do is obviously that next layer down. So kind of really diving a little bit deeper. But that's how we're seeing some people get to their clients. And not in that FUD, scary, people are coming to get you kind of way, but just in a like, this is about you. This is your risk, not a general, the bogeyman's out there.
Yeah, and what I like about your product too is that you can, with the information you're collecting, with the threat intelligence you're offering, you can actually prioritize the type of kind of vulnerability that should be looking at, even from an external point of view, and it kind of makes sense to that. I think that's one of the feedback that we got a lot from MSPs, is they just don't know a lot of times on how to kind of communicate that to their users directly. And then if you're building kind of context and such around that's super helpful, for at least for the communication to someone who's a non-technical in nature, and kind of letting them know like how to kind of think about all that. So that's really helpful.
Well, I do a little threat update each week, and one of the things I covered this week was a pretty new tool. A small business doesn't really need to know all this detail, but this tool is 16 phishing tools, including something that's pretty sophisticated, an adversary in the middle, where they're taking session cookies and using that to log into accounts. So you're compromising emails really easily. And this is available for cyber criminals to buy for a few $100s a month. Like, this isn't a big financial investment for them, but it's a huge financial reward. And actually, if you're a small business and I compromise your emails and I get $10,000 from an invoice fraud, that's a big deal. And that's actually hasn't cost me very much to do, but it's a big deal to you as a small business. They don't care that you're small, they just care that you send invoices. So send invoices, like you're at risk. So I like the way of using kind of those sort of stories to get that across as well. And if you can put money on it, even better. Trusted devices, sort of having some policies and processes around there. That's the big thing for that particular thing. But general email security, you know, how many small businesses have put in DMARC and SPF, or even what that is? Like, but these are cyber hygiene things that an MSP can really help with. But yeah, there is obviously an education piece to smaller businesses about why they need to care.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess the approach that we take is basically like we do like a full on like audit, find out how much assets they have, right? You know, it can be like the type of data repository, the type of like softwares that they're using, the type of employees that they have and the knowledge that they do. And then like kind of like in each one of those assets, we look at kind of the vulnerabilities on each one. You know, so if it's assets, like the vulnerabilities piece of it, or if it's if it's employees, what type of education that do they have, what type of awareness do they have? And then, you know, once you have all that data, then like how does it kind of, what are your threat vectors at that point? How do they correlate with each other? And then if they were to get hit, what is kind of like the exposure level, or what is the full impact of something like that? So it's kind of like a four stage thing that we do almost. So it's kind of really interesting to see. You know, I mean, like a lot of times, like for example, we see a lot of very weak passwords that are essentially just passwords, a series of numbers or whatnot. Or we see, for example, a lot of just not devices just not being updated from like years ago, and they don't have like a good patching cadence kind of set in place. So that there's definitely clearly kind of weaknesses that we can draw out, and then it's kind of, you know, to Karla's point on like how can we point this to other stories, or, you know, other kind of examples that have been kind of cases of breaches that we have seen these kind of threat vectors been applied to. So that's some of the things that, you know, kind of we've been working on as we collect more and more data. I think it's going to be really interesting to start correlating all of them and start seeing where, and start benchmarking on these threat vectors and such itself. So that's what we're looking forward to.
I mean, I guess it's going to depend on what the MSP is charging, and, you know, what those attacks cost, you know, because some of the numbers out there, they're not really relevant, right? Like the average cost I was reading this week is $9 million or something. That's not relevant to a small business. Like, you know, that's
Yeah, at that point you might as well just close up shop.
But saying like, well, what if someone's rediverting the emails with your invoices, and they're getting in there and they've compromised your emails and they're changing the bank details on your invoices? How much is that going to cost if you lose that for a month? Or if someone sends an email from your employee and diverts where their salary goes and they don't notice for a month, like how much does that cost you, and how much does that hurt? Because those things, they're smaller numbers, but they're really realistic and they're not hard to go and do either. So yeah, I think it's about making it in a way that's actually realistic for numbers that they can relate to. I think I've been in cyber a little while, back when it was barely called cyber, and there were, you know, heads of information security that were one-man teams who were trying to get boards and senior people to care about security. So this challenge is not new. And I think one of the things I've seen is that regulation has a huge effect on it. It's not always the business case. It's about being forced to do something. And we're seeing some of that come through in the US right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of that. I think that's maybe not a one-off story, but, you know, that's a big learning I've seen around how you can do so much to convince people, but also they probably need to be forced a little bit at some point. And MSPs are doing that, right? They're refusing to work with customers that won't take their security measures because they don't want to take the risk. So it might be that we force their hand that way. I mean, there's a lot of new privacy legislation, right? I think 12 states now have their own privacy laws. So if you're in one of those states, you know, you're covered on that. 12 states, we're probably going to see more. We'll probably get to the point where it's all of them, and then there's some federal rule. The big thing that I've seen this year is the SEC regulations. Now, unless you have FS clients, you're probably not really affected by that, and maybe not even then. But that's going to trickle down because third-party risk is littered throughout those regulations. And so if you have clients who serve a listed company, that is coming to you through that regulation.
Especially in the last few months, I think I have to kind of dial my brain to kind of start thinking of, what really matters to the person that I'm talking about, that I'm talking to. And it's like it's such like a simple like kind of learning, kind of in retrospect. But that there's a lot of times. I mean, this applies on every level, right? A lot of times I do realize that like talking to MSPs, they just so cared about a lot of times about the tools. And more on a technical front. But what do their clients care about? And like when do they even think about security? When do they think about IT? What do they think about digital risk or any type of digital tools in general? And what does it enable them to do? It's kind of like having that sense of empathy for them to see like how they're actually thinking about certain way. And then kind of once you have that, it's really easy to kind of work backwards and see how we can kind of satisfy that need or partner or whatever it might be. So trying to kind of start more and more kind of tuning my brain to have more empathy towards multiple different use cases, and in multiple scenarios. So I mean, like whatever happens, I think this has been a great kind of journey and experience to help build that.
I think any MSP that wants to learn more about third-party risk or how they can use security to further their businesses, and LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. I'm on there far more than I should be.
Yeah, if you want to learn just more about at least the starting steps on how to become a cyber risk advisor, and start kind of starting those conversations with your clients or prospects, please check us out at telivy.com. You can also email support@telivy. We'll reach back to you right away. Or LinkedIn is always a good option as well. So I mean, it seems like almost everyone should just do like a 1 month internship, at one of their customers' place, right? So
Thank you.
thanks for